Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Joyce Kim. Today's topic, a report from the front lines of cybersecurity and what it means for marketers. Now, Joyce is currently the CMO of Zscaler, a cloud security company which features a zero trust exchange. We'll talk about that later. She was previously the CMO of Twilio, Genesys, ARM, and Reich, and has also worked at Google, Microsoft, and Deloitte. So steeped in technology, welcome, Joyce.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be here.
Nice to have you. First question, why don't you just give us a broad overview of the cybersecurity landscape? Here's how I think about it. Always in the news, but probably not understood, not even deeply, just past the surface by most people. How should our listeners think about the cybersecurity landscape?
Yeah, cybersecurity is actually quite expansive. When you think about the world now becoming much more digital and all of us sort of living online, I think this is one of the critical areas where, protecting all your data and your assets and everything we do as consumers and companies, it just becomes more and more important. So it sort of encompasses, securing your endpoints, which are like your laptops and mobile devices and things like that, to all the different applications that you interact with and sort of the network that connects those two things.
And Joyce, just one thing, endpoint is any device I have that is at the end of the line, right? Is that how I think about the endpoint? It could be anything. Like, how do I think about that?
Yeah, it could be, like I said, your laptop, mobile device,
anything,
an IoT, your Ring doorbell. You name it, like anything that is connected in some way or some electronic that you use in cars, right? That could be an endpoint.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess your point would be that there are so many endpoints people may not be thinking about that are actually endpoints and breach possibilities for, your personal stuff or your company stuff. So when we think about all the data, all the endpoints, all the apps, and then we think about breaches, there's been so many, they almost don't even, they make the news, but then they kind of don't. Stay around. There's been Ticketmaster, Neiman Marcus, Advanced Auto Parts, Ascension Healthcare. That's just the ones I pulled up for June. Do consumers care? Companies obviously care. Maybe the government cares. How many people care about this? And how do you think about managing how they care about it?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really interesting point in that we call it breach fatigue. I think in sort of the consumer landscape, it's absolutely real. You kind of get numb to it, right? Like I actually received a letter from some healthcare company that, says my information is exposed and, they're giving me a year's trial of credit monitoring, whatever, right?
Right. No, we're going to give this year free thing, sign up for this. And you're like, oh my God, I can't even bear this. Or everyone has it.
I was thinking I already have it from the other two that I got, so I'm probably good. But it's real. And so I do think that that's one of the sort of bigger issues. But let me kind of take a step back and say, I think consumers care deeply about privacy and how companies handle their personal information, right? But they typically think about it in how are you going to use it? So it's sort of hey, I want to give you my information, but I don't want you to send me a bunch of spam or junk. But when you think about it, that company is still collecting that information and they're responsible for that information. So having sort of cybersecurity becomes critical to maintaining and continuing to earn that trust with consumers. And so when you think about it, like we know cyber attacks are increasing. I think, we monitor that sort of on an annual basis, and our research found that it's like 18% increase so far. So
No kidding.
yeah, absolutely. And the payouts, like the ransom, is getting bigger and bigger. So it's not going to stop. And I think it's one of those things where, technology is fueling it. So you have more things that are becoming digital. You now have AI. And so there's just a plethora of, sort of surface area, if you will, for these things to happen.
I want to go back to this, but you mentioned ransom, and that's one of the things you don't read about is how many companies are actually paying the ransom. But I take in that comment that you made that maybe a lot of companies are paying it and just not publicizing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say like, how many. And now I think if you're a public company, that their SEC is requiring you
Right.
to actually, report on that. But, there's so much. Smaller companies as well. We've definitely seen where, they become more vulnerable because they don't have as much resources, but they typically have cyber insurance. So it is quite a prevalent issue.
So how do companies or Zscaler or anybody measure the impact of a breach?
A breach has brand impacts. It has, as I said, if you're a consumer facing company, there's trust issues that become sort of, vulnerability with your employees. So it's expansive. This is one where it's board level, right? So
Yeah.
like you have to, as a company, be very, very conscious about, how you're protecting yourself, what proactive measures you're putting in, and then how your reactive plan goes. So there's today, I think it is at sort of the top of mind, the C-level and the board level.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I know it's always, on my board's always up there. But how do you measure or even gauge it? You get a breach like the Target breach a couple of years ago, or some of these recent breaches. How long does it take you to assess? Gosh, this is a brand impact, a financial impact, potentially customer acquisition impact, which I guess goes to brand. How do you put a number around it?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on, how you've prepared for it and how you've reacted. As I just said, there's companies that have very well thought through the plan, what they're
Right.
going to do, whether they pay, and a lot of it, depending on your particular situation. I think it spans from paying something quickly, getting everything back, and then, it's sort of a blip in your overall operations, to there are companies that have been down for weeks and like,
Oh, right.
Employees have no productivity. Your business is essentially shut down. So it spans across the board.
So I'm looking at this, and one of our earlier guests said this is a race between the people that want to break down your defenses and people that are building them up. We have AI now coming into play all over the place, helping marketers, helping customer service, at speed. That's also a tool available to all the bad folks trying to get into your system. Tell us about this fight and just write AI into this from a cyber perspective. And then as marketers are playing around with AI at all the endpoints with their customers and everything else, how should they be? This is like a 5-part question. How should they be thinking about, AI and cyber, and what are some best practices here?
Yeah, I mean, so let's take a step back and just take AI as an example, right?
Yeah.
So first, before even technology comes into play, you have sort of bad actors that are, constantly pushing the envelope. And frankly, they're probably better at what, and I'm going to put in air quotes, like innovating than the companies, right? Because companies have processes and there's procedures and there's operations and there's legal, all these things that sort of create this, barrier or friction point in order to do things quickly, versus if you think about like, black hats and bad actors, like there's nothing stopping them. They just kind of keep trialing stuff and they're able to move very quickly. Now,
And they only have one job, and that's to break down your system
Exactly.
Your other departments have a lot of jobs, and so yeah, the bad actor thing is I only have one job, and all I need is one win.
Exactly. And so now you add a technology like AI, and it's funny, like our CEO will say, we're probably going to get to a place where like generative AI has become so advanced that you can basically ask it to find you vulnerable attack surfaces, and it'll come back with the best way of doing that. So can you imagine somebody with, malintent to be able to just leverage AI to find vulnerabilities and then to be able to execute something without really having to be like, the super sleuth person. And so if the world becomes potentially that vulnerable, like this is where, as a marketer, I think about that, in that we're probably the person in the company that collects the most amount of data,
Right.
the most, and AI, think about it, is being injected to so many marketing tools and different systems and applications that we're using. So it's just going to proliferate. And when you have these sort of beyond just data, it becomes sort of insights and intent and all the stuff that you know about your customers and potential customers. You really have to make sure that that information is secure. And I think, especially because we in marketing by design are going outbound, right? We go
Right.
outside to the world. So we could actually create a vulnerable point for our company. So these are all like things that I think before we kind of left it to IT to think about it. And I think more and more, sort of the product and the marketing areas are going to have to be much more conscious of, what are they doing to secure their company and sort of their assets that they have.
Yeah, this is a CISO's nightmare right here. AI attacks with marketers on the loose. So, I mean, I'm just all these marketers. You're gonna, oh my God, I can personalize everything. I can run this thing out. It's great. And your CISO is probably back there going, oh my God, you're gonna kill me. So what is a best practice for marketers as they are unleashing all these things at the endpoints with their customers?
Yeah, I mean, this is where I think, we talked about sort of cybersecurity landscape, right? So there's broadly two very sort of different approaches that the industry has taken. And historically, sort of the legacy way of doing it was you built sort of, your wall around your domain, like whatever you were going to protect, you put it in this place, you build a firewall around it, and keep people out. So that was sort of the traditional approach. Now for the last, actually Zscaler sort of pioneered this notion of zero trust. And so zero trust is an approach where you kind of take the posture that nothing is trusted. So you don't it's not about building a wall and letting stuff in. It's about understanding, you, Mike, as an individual have access to this application, and I, Joyce, have access to other applications. So I'm just going to create a secure way for you two to connect, do that without, Mike, you cannot access what I access, and I can't do what you do. The other sort of...
So is this like a personal passcode that Zero Trust is setting up, or how am I thinking about it?
Yeah, that's
everything has MFA and all kinds of stuff. This is something different than that, right?
Yeah. So the best analogy that like pretty much anyone can understand is, think about like if you go to an office building, most of the time you check in with the receptionist, you give your ID, they verify like you are who you are, and then you get this like visitor's badge and you get let in the door, right? And theoretically, you can go anywhere in that building. So it's sort of, that is the firewall traditional way. Now, what we're saying is you do the same thing. You still check in. I check your ID. I validate who you are, but I give you an escorted path to that particular conference room that you are only allowed to go in, which is why you're visiting me. And you can go nowhere else. So that's sort of the distinction on how the two different approaches work.
That's super. I think that is a great example because, when you get in a lot of those buildings in like New York City or anywhere else, you're going anywhere you want. Okay, that is really good. And then, as we talk about zero trust, and I think that was a great example, and you gave us some examples of how marketers should help defend the perimeter or defend the building. What can they do to help their, Chief Information Security Officer or CISO? What can they do to make it easy for them when they're getting to a new tool? I mean, of course, other than hire Zscaler, but
this is the ability to not think about it, right? CMOs use a lot of systems and applications and tools. By the way, most of them are SaaS-based, so they don't fit in my CIO's, sort of domain, if you will. So yes, when we have, the ability to license some tool, they'll, IT and security will do their checks and so forth.
Right.
But you're still vulnerable in that, hey, I could be creating, some entry point for a bad actor to come in if I don't use the right security measures. So this is where a company, that does zero trust will limit that exposure. The other thing that's really, really unique about how, secure zero trust architecture works is that, for example, Zscaler sort of masks you. So you were Best Buy, right? If you, come from your corporate system to access some, marketing system, the outside world does not know it's Best Buy. So to them, it just looks like a Zscaler path. And so they don't know how to target you, meaning you become completely invisible to the bad people. So from a marketer's perspective, you want to be as invisible as possible so that you do not become a target of anyone trying to infiltrate your system. That is the second really critical piece that, and whether you're a marketer, a salesperson, or anyone out in the field, that's what's going to be the most important.
Got it. So a lot of this probably where marketers can go off the rails is the MarTech stack, maybe. You can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but you get a lot of marketers that don't have time to wait for something to get done, and then they go buy a piece of software at the edge, or they go buy a program, or they hire an agency to do something, and they don't fully integrate it with the stack. Is that a true thing marketers should be thinking about, or am I just making that up?
No, I mean, I think that's 99% of how we function today. There's no question.
So I think there's a lesson here for marketers that we have when we've had a couple CIOs on, which is don't go rogue. Like you will say it's taking too long to get this done, or it's taking too long to do this, blah, 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 blah. But if you go rogue, you might be going into the Pandora's box zone where you're opening up a gateway to the whole company because you didn't actually bring in the right players. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, but the way that I would look at it is to say, if your company has implemented this zero trust architecture, it's okay, because again, the bad actors will never know it's you. So like our big thing is, if they can't see you, they can't attack you, right? So that's the whole point. You need to make sure that as a CMO, you're working very closely with your CIO to understand, hey, what is our security approach? How are we making sure that our company is protected, and all the things that I'm collecting from my customers and consumers are going to be safe? Like, that is a conversation that I think every CMO has to have. And that's not one that we're used to having. We're used to saying, hey, can I get access to this system? Can I do this? But we really now have to understand, what are we as a company doing to protect our data?
I think that's a super thing to say. It's your responsibility too, marketers.
For sure.
So, you've seen a lot of breaches. If I'm the marketer there and I have to manage, once the breach happens, what's the best way to manage this once it comes out? I mean, and you obviously have to have a Pandora's box or ready, set, go kind of thing. But what recommendations would you give people to be prepared for a breach, even if you're pretty certain one won't happen?
As we talked about, we know the attacks are happening and it's probably going to increase in frequency, right? So I think there's no question that a company, and as we talked about, marketing has to be prepared for that. So in my experience, the best way to sort of manage through it is sort of two things: full transparency and what I call sort of long tail ongoing communications. So about 6 years ago,
Go.
I went through this huge security incident in the semiconductor industry when I was with the ARM. The press actually called it like Spectre and Meltdown. I mean, it was like huge. I
Sounds like a
actually
Star Trek
got
thing.
called to
Yeah.
testify in front of the Senate committee kind of thing. Like, it was huge.
We're having all the fun, Joyce, all the fun.
Exactly. The idea, unfortunately, like the industry itself, and this is like Intel, AMD, ARM, so all x86 and ARM-based CPUs were compromised because of a design flaw. It had an unintended consequence of potentially, giving access to some sensitive data. So we all sort of banded together to manage this vulnerability. But what I remember the most is it was an industry-wide collaboration where we shared information, so full transparency. We knew it wasn't sort of a one-time and you're done kind of thing. I think the updates and all the information that came out kept going for months and months. And we did both proactive and sort of, hey, here's how you find more information. And we brought in more partners and ecosystem and customers just to make sure that everybody understood the impact to them and what was being done. So, you get through sort of this big initial storm, and a lot of companies think, oh, well, we're done.
Right.
It goes on. And so like when as we talked about in the beginning, like it sort of gets out of the consciousness of consumers and all of that, like you still have to continue to manage through a lot of the things that will come through. But it's being proactive about it and like being prepared for it that will matter.
Oh, I hear you say, yes, manage it in the short term, but don't assume it's gone because it's off the news. It's not off the news for the people that got burned by it. Is that a fair comment? Exactly. So let's talk about this, because let's flip over to how do you market a product like this, because this is a product that is the absence of breaches and bad things happening. So you're selling the absence of a negative. How do you market something like this in a space where there's so many great players and so much technology running around? What's some tips you would give marketers selling a product like this?
As you said, I think security is one where, for example, for us, we really try and talk about the value of staying ahead of the cyber criminals and sort of how they're moving quickly and sort of what are the new vectors of attacks versus you can't do what you would traditionally do by saying like, we're the best at something, right? Because then you kind of paint this target on yourself and you don't want to do that either. So from a marketer's perspective, it's understanding our customers and what their, sort of issues and pain points are, but also educating them on sort of the newer things that are coming. And so the way that I say it is, look, cybersecurity, while it is one of the most important things in any company, is not your core business, but it is ours. So our ability to see what's trending, what's sort of, being tried and, sort of what are the things that we're seeing across the board is something that our customers can benefit from. So from a marketer's perspective, I try and sort of relay that message versus, more than like we stop breaches. Like that, I know that people say that, but it's a very nuanced thing that we go through.
And you sell more against I'm afraid of all these bad guys out there breaching me, or we're on the cutting edge of this, so you should have us and then you can do what you want kind of thing?
It's both, actually. Because I mean, they're hand in hand, right? So I mean, if you believe that we have the best ability to spot things, like we stop, I think, billions of attacks, across the world. Like it's just one of those things where you don't even know that you're in danger, and we've stopped it. So you have to believe that we can stay ahead of that, and then that gives you the freedom to continue to do what you want to do in this new digital world kind of thing.
All right, then you can choose to market it or not, right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, you've been in tech your entire career, really. And sometimes, and I've spent some time in tech too, a lot of times tech does not always have the best reputation for understanding or valuing marketing. Give us your take on tech and marketing, and then advice for marketers that want to be in tech.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
That's okay. You can disagree. That's part of the show.
What I will say is it has not been my personal experience as a CMO in various companies and leadership and tech companies. So I think a lot of tech companies value growth. And in my experience, sort of you as a marketer have to be the engine for growth. Yeah. And that'll typically come in, traditionally it's sort of pipeline building for sales. Now, I think you're seeing more and more where product-led growth is really, really instrumental to a lot of companies. So whether, you think about it as new product launches, entering a new market geographically, whatever, I think marketers have to have the attitude that we're building the groundwork for sales to be successful. We're creating sort of a soft landing spot for the company to expand. So, from a tech perspective, if a marketer owns that, so it becomes sort of you're taking ownership for the pipeline or the revenue targets, that's what's going to get you to be seen differently from the business. And I'm not sure a lot of marketers actually do that,
I agree with that. That, like, they're giving you money to grow the business. If you're not really growing it and you don't understand how to grow it profitably, you're probably not going to be in a good space. Yeah. When you are interviewing, any good interview questions that you would recommend our users, our listeners, ask to see if they're going to fit into the company?
So me as a marketing leader, I'm typically interviewing functional leaders within my team or something, right? So the question that I like to ask them is sort of how do you define marketing? And I will tell you, I've seen it's usually within two buckets. Some people will rattle off, here's all the functions that they do, right? Like the marketer is responsible for product marketing and PR and blah, blah, blah. Others will go much more towards the business impact. So I know for me, when I'm interviewing somebody and they go down the path of, hey, my job is to make sure that we meet our revenue targets and we're, sort of successful in these strategic areas, that's the person I'm going to hire.
I agree that marketing is a means to an end, not an end to itself.
Yes.
So, all right. So I think that's a great way to get to our traditional last question. And it's a two-part question. You have to take at least one, but you can take both. Funniest story you can tell on the air, and or piece of practical advice we haven't discussed yet. Yours to pick. Have to pick at least one, but we're always happy if you want to take two.
So I might try both.
All right. Go for
funny story, because this one always sticks with me, and I have to explain it to people, which is why it's something that I do talk about. So, there's not actually a lot of women in leadership positions in tech. That might be shocking, but it's true. So a while ago, I was doing a keynote for one of the user conferences in my company, and I think out of 8 speakers, there was literally one other woman, right? So she was the customer success leader or something. And so we were both going to speak, and there was one portion where we were both going to speak together. It was I speak, we speak together, and then she speaks. We showed up to this thing wearing literally almost the exact same outfit. And I'm not talking like, we're both wearing like a black suit or a blue suit.
Yeah.
It was like a red jacket with a black blouse and like same colored shoes. We joked that we looked like two airline stewardesses.
There you go.
After that, I actually am pretty obsessive about asking people, like, even though I'm not speaking, like, what are you wearing? Like, and they'll ask me, like, why are you asking me that? I don't know. And I always say, like, oh, well, you'd be surprised. And sometimes it's like, I don't want you to wear checkers or, things that won't look good.
Yeah, that's what bad on that camera can't pick up, right?
Yeah. But my ulterior motive is to make sure I don't have like 8 men in blue suits and jeans or something.
I think that's right.
Like,
look, there's been times where I'm like, this is a sea of blue sport coats and khakis. My God.
Exactly. You have to like say, do you have a tan jacket or a gray jacket? So.
Yes, I relate to this. Once I wore a pattern jacket and I got the question of, how could you even do that? And I'm like, I'm standing against the tyranny of blue jackets and khaki pants.
Exactly. Although now I've seen all men wear like the exact same checkered jacket. And you're
exactly. And then it's hard to stay trendy. So let's go to the practical advice piece.
Okay. So when I was early in my career, someone once told me that if you pick a mentor, pick somebody that is not in your function and somebody you don't know well. And I thought, God, that is so antithetical to what I would kind of do, because I would have picked somebody more senior in marketing and probably someone that I know I can talk to. And the reason why they told me to pick someone like that was you already have people that you get along with and that'll advocate for you. And the point of having mentors is to get a different perspective than what you and your sort of, like groups have. And you can it's an opportunity to have an advocate outside, which is typically, in a business setting, a lot more powerful than like my boss's boss's boss, right? So I found that incredibly helpful. And I've actually used it kind of throughout my career, which has given me sort of, hey, how does engineering see marketing? How does product see marketing? So it's really helpful.
I think that is a very wise piece of practical advice and a great way to end the show. So thank you, Joyce, and thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. If you're enjoying the show, please like, share, and subscribe. Look for all of our shows on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the I Hear Everything Network, which include Marketing, The Battle Between Believers and Non-Believers, Parts 1, 2, and 3. Secrets from a CFO, What Your Agency Wants to Tell You But Won't, Parts 1, 2, and 3, and A Marketer Turned Tech Exec talks about big data, mainframes, and AI. Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.